The restaurant was filled with laughter glasses raised high for a graduation toast. Then Gregory, Bianca's husband of 28 years, stood up. Everyone expected warm words for their daughter. Instead, he said, "I've decided to start a new life without you." The room froze. 50 pairs of eyes turned to Bianca, waiting for her to break. But she didn't. She smiled. Because what no one knew, what Gregory never imagined, was that Bianca had been preparing for this moment. Hidden in her bag was a simple cream envelope, inside evidence of betrayal, financial deception, and divorce papers, timed to perfection. He thought he was humiliating her. He thought he was free. But, in reality, he had just walked into her trap. This is not a story of heartbreak. It's a story of strategy, revenge, and rebirth. And it all begins with that smile. "I've decided to start a new life without you." The words hung in the air of the upscale restaurant where we'd gathered to celebrate my daughter's college graduation. Gregory, my husband of 28 years, stood with his champagne glass still raised, his announcement displacing the toast he was supposed to be making to Amelia's achievements. The clinking of silverware ceased. The restaurant shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden reflections across champagne flutes, polished silverware, and tables draped in linen. The air hummed with celebration laughter, proud conversations, the joyful chaos of a family gathering for something monumental, Amelia's college graduation. At the center of it all, I sat, Bianca Caldwell, 54 years old. For 28 years, I played the role of devoted wife and mother with flawless precision. I was the woman who sacrificed her own dreams so my husband could chase his. The woman who worked late nights, counted every dollar, and told herself, "After Amelia graduates, I'll start living for me." I had once dreamed of running a financial consultancy for women, giving them the knowledge to protect themselves. Something I wish someone had done for me. But those dreams were shelved one after another each time Gregory declared his newest venture. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself it was worth it. And tonight, I told myself, was proof. My daughter Amelia, in her graduation cap and gown, sat glowing with achievement. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every silent tear, it had led to this moment of pride. Then the silence before the shatter. Gregory, my husband, rose with his champagne glass. Everyone expected a toast, words of pride for Amelia, gratitude for family, a father's joy. Instead, he said the words that would split my life into before and after. "I've decided to start a new life without you." The restaurant fell silent. Forks hovered mid-air. 50 pairs of eyes darted between him and me. They waited for the collapse, for tears, for the wife humiliated beyond repair. But I didn't break. I smiled, calm, composed. Because while Gregory thought he was orchestrating a grand exit, he had no idea that I'd already prepared my own performance. My fingers brushed the cream-colored envelope inside my handbag. Smooth, paper-sharp edges. Within it, bank records, hidden transfers, text messages, a divorce petition, all meticulously gathered by the woman he thought too loyal, too blind to notice. I leaned close to him, my voice soft but cutting. "Congratulations on your honesty." Gasps spread across the room. Amelia's face went pale, her cap tilting as if the weight of betrayal pulled it down. At a back table, Cassandra Wells, Gregory's younger mistress, and someone I once called a friend, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I kissed Amelia's cheek, whispered, "This day is still yours, sweetheart." Then I rose, smoothed my dress, and walked out, head held high. The door closed behind me, shutting Gregory inside the silence he had created. Outside, the Augusta summer heat pressed against me, heavy, yet liberating. For the first time in years, I felt air fill my lungs without restraint. Then I heard the slam of the restaurant door. Gregory's voice, stripped of confidence, breaking into panic. "Bianca, what the hell is this? What have you done?" I didn't turn back. A faint smile curved on my lips, because he thought this was the end of me. But in truth, it was only the beginning. From the outside, my life looked like the kind of marriage people envied. We had the house with the white shutters in Augusta's historic district. We had the manicured lawn, the picture-perfect holiday cards, the daughter who excelled at everything she touched. Neighbors saw me and Gregory as stable, successful, and above all happy. But the truth was less glamorous. My life was built on sacrifice, layer upon layer, until I could no longer see where my own dreams ended and Gregory's began. I remember the first time I shelved my ambition. I had just turned 26, freshly married, freshly hopeful. I dreamed of starting a consultancy for women, helping them manage their finances, prepare for the future, and gain independence. It was more than a career idea. It was a calling. I had grown up watching my mother struggle after my father left, and I swore I'd never let another woman live without power over her own money. But when Gregory came home with his eyes sparkling, talking about a can't-miss business venture, I pushed my dream to the side. He wanted to partner with a friend to open a restaurant, and he swore it would set us up for life. "Just give me a few years, Bianca. Once this takes off, you can do anything you want," he told me. I nodded, believing him, and I picked up extra hours at my job to make sure the bills were paid, while his dream took flight. Except the restaurant failed. And then came the handcrafted furniture idea. He spent 6 months pouring energy into it before he grew bored, leaving me once again to carry the financial weight. Then it was a tech startup. Then it was real estate. Each new idea was supposed to be the one. Each new promise came with the same assurance. "Just hold on a little longer, Bianca." So I held on. Night after night, I sat at dinners where Gregory's voice filled the room with ambition. His hands gestured wildly as he sketched out plans on napkins, talking about investors' expansions and how the next venture would finally bring us wealth. I smiled, nodded, and passed the potatoes. Outwardly supportive, inwardly exhausted. Meanwhile, my dream, the consultancy, the office filled with women eager to learn, sat on a dusty shelf in my mind. I told myself I'd get to it after Amelia starts school, or after Gregory finds stability, or after Amelia graduates. Always later. Never now. That was the rhythm of my life, the steady drip of compromise. Each drop small on its own, but together they eroded the foundation of who I once thought I was. The world saw a devoted wife. The truth was that I had become the scaffolding holding up Gregory's endless construction projects. And yet, despite the exhaustion, I convinced myself it was love. That's what love was supposed to be, wasn't it? Sacrifice. Partnership. Believing in someone even when they stumbled. But there's a fine line between love and erasure. And somewhere along the way, I had crossed it. Even before Gregory's announcement in the restaurant, the cracks in our facade had begun to show. At first, they were small, subtle, easy to ignore if I wanted to. And for a long time, I did. I noticed the bank accounts first. I had always been the one to manage our finances, a habit born out of both necessity and skill. Numbers made sense to me. They told the truth when words didn't. So when I began spotting small, unfamiliar transfers, I paused. They weren't huge $200 here, $500 there, but they didn't match our spending habits. When I asked Gregory about them, he waved it off with charm. "Business expenses. Don't worry about it." He kissed my forehead and changed the subject. And I, wanting peace, wanting to believe, let it go. Then there were the phone calls. He'd step outside in the middle of dinner, phone pressed tight against his ear, voice low but tense. I'd catch fragments. Not now. She'll notice. After graduation. The words snagged in my mind like burrs, but each time I confronted him, he brushed them off. Just work stuff, Bianca. You wouldn't understand. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Gregory snored beside me. Silence filled the spaces between us, thick, suffocating silence. My intuition whispered that something was wrong, but I silenced it with rationalizations. He's stressed. He's tired. He's going through a phase. I had been married long enough to know that relationships go through seasons. I told myself this was just a winter and spring would come again. Still, unease lingered. I remember one night vividly. I had gotten up to get a glass of water and found Gregory sitting in the study, his laptop open, a faint blue glow on his face. He didn't notice me at first. I saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way he snapped the screen shut when he realized I was there. He smiled too quickly. Couldn't sleep. Just checking emails. I wanted to believe him. I really did. So I kissed his cheek, said goodnight, and returned to bed. But my chest ached with something I couldn't name, a creeping fear that my life was no longer entirely mine. These moments piled up, odd bank balances, hushed calls, late-night silences. Each time I smoothed them over in my mind, painting over cracks with excuses. Because if I admitted the truth, it meant my sacrifices had been for nothing. It meant my 28 years had built not a life, but a stage for betrayal. And I wasn't ready to face that. Not yet. But the thing about doubt is that it doesn't disappear. It waits. It grows. And eventually it demands to be heard. The restaurant glowed like a jewel that night. Every chandelier sparkled as if it knew this was a special occasion. Every polished glass reflected light like a promise. The air carried the scent of roasted lamb with rosemary-seared salmon with citrus glaze, and champagne bubbles fizzing like laughter. Waiters moved swiftly, their black vests pressed sharp, their footsteps muffled against the carpeted floor. The clinking of glasses rose and fell like music punctuated by bursts of laughter, the kind that comes from pride. Pride in accomplishment, pride in family. At the center of the grand dining hall sat our table, my family's table. My daughter Amelia sat with her graduation cap still on the tassel bobbing when she turned her head. She was radiant, glowing with the kind of triumph you only get to taste once in a lifetime. And I was proud. Proud in a way words cannot capture. She was my proof that sacrifice had not been wasted. I sat with my back straight, my dress smoothed over my lap, my hands resting lightly on the tablecloth. Around us, our friends filled the other tables, people who had known us for decades. They had watched Amelia grow up. They had been in our home, toasted at our Christmas parties, danced at our anniversaries. They thought they knew us. They thought we were perfect. The room brimmed with elegance, but beneath the glitter, I felt something heavier, the weight of years. 28 years compressed into one moment. It was supposed to be Amelia's night. But Gregory was about to turn it into mine. When Gregory rose from his seat, champagne glass in hand, I braced myself for what he would say. I expected him to praise our daughter, to speak with the pride of a father. But his lips curved into something else, something rehearsed. And then, with his voice loud enough to silence the room, he said, "I've decided to start a new life without you." The words sliced through the air like glass shattering on marble. Time slowed. The clinking of silverware stopped. Laughter died. Conversations froze mid-sentence. 50 pairs of eyes turned to me. I could feel the collective breath of the room held waiting waiting for me to break, for the tears, for the screaming, for the drama. But instead, I smiled. My body on the outside remained utterly still. Not a tremor, not a twitch. Inside, though, was chaos. My heart pounded so loudly, it seemed to echo in my skull. My mind raced in circles, flashes of our wedding day, our first apartment, the sleepless nights with baby Amelia, the miscarriages, the promises, the laughter, the disappointments, the betrayals. 28 years looping inside me like a film reel sped too fast. And yet not a single muscle betrayed me. It was like a psychological breakdown in reverse. Instead of exploding outward, everything collapsed inward. My calm was not serenity, it was survival. It was the stillness of a deer in headlights, the poise of a soldier before battle. I looked at Gregory, studied his triumphant smirk, the way he lifted his chin, convinced he had seized control. And I thought, you fool, you think this is power? You think this is freedom? You don't even know the war you've already lost. From the corner of my eye, I saw Amelia freeze her smile, vanishing her face, paling. I wanted to reach for her to shield her, but I couldn't, not yet. The performance had to continue. So I breathed, in, out, slow, steady, and then I leaned forward, lips curving into something deliberate, a smile. Congratulations, I said softly, on your honesty. Gasps rippled through the room. Beneath the table, my hand brushed against the smooth leather of my handbag. My fingers found the edge of the cream-colored envelope hidden inside. The feel of it grounded me. Firm, cool. A rectangle of quiet power. Inside that envelope was not just paper. It was a secret army, every document, a soldier, every line of text, a weapon. Bank statements showing transfers Gregory thought I wouldn't notice. Credit card charges at restaurants I had never dined in. Jewelry receipts for gifts I never received. Screenshots of messages where he told Cassandra after graduation, I'll finally be free. And at the top of that stack, the divorce petition prepared and timed to perfection. My hand tightened around it. I could feel the sharp edge of the paper bite into my skin. It was real. It was mine. It was the culmination of months of silent nights, of swallowing pain, of pretending not to know. Gregory thought he had orchestrated a grand humiliation. But the truth was, I had orchestrated something far greater. He believed he was announcing the end. What he didn't know was that I had already written the beginning of his downfall. The envelope pulsed beneath my fingertips like a heartbeat. It whispered to me, patience, timing, soon. And I realized then, this wasn't the night Gregory left me. This was the night I reclaimed myself. Look at him. Look at the pride in his face. He thinks he's the director of this play, but I've been writing the script for months. He doesn't even realize he's a character in my story now. Breathe, Bianca. Breathe. Don't let them see you falter. Not Amelia. Not the friends who knew and said nothing. Not Cassandra squirming in the corner wondering if you've already guessed. Show them strength. Show them grace. That's what will break him most, not anger, not tears. Grace. This day is Amelia's. Protect her. Shield her. She doesn't deserve to have her triumph smeared by his betrayal. Smile for her. Walk tall for her. And when the time comes, strike. Not with fury, but with precision. That's what power is, not noise, but silence turned into a weapon. Hasui. I turned to Amelia, kissed her cheek, whispered, "This day is still yours, sweetheart." Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and faced the room. "Please," I said to the guests, my voice calm, steady. "Enjoy your meal. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." And with that, I walked away 50 pairs of eyes, following whispers, chasing me like shadows. Behind me, I left Gregory with his false triumph, Cassandra with her restless guilt, Amelia with her frozen shock. Ahead of me waited the summer heat, thick and heavy, pressing against my skin. But it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The door slammed open behind me, and Gregory's voice rose no longer triumphant, but high-pitched and frantic. "Bianca, what the hell is this? What have you done?" I kept walking. My fingers pressed against the envelope. My smile grew, because this was not the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of my revenge. It began as betrayals often do not with fireworks, but with numbers. I was sitting at my desk one evening long, after Amelia had gone back to her campus apartment, and Gregory claimed he was at a business dinner. The house was quiet, the grandfather clock ticking its steady heartbeat in the hallway. I opened our joint account out of habit. I wasn't expecting trouble. I was just making sure the bills were paid. But there it was, a transfer of $750 to an account I didn't recognize. The name was vague, a generic C. Wells. At first I thought it might have been a vendor. Gregory sometimes hired contractors for his projects, but something about it caught my attention. I leaned closer, my eyes narrowing. This wasn't a one-time transfer. It had a pattern, bi-weekly, then weekly, the amounts fluctuating, but always just under $1,000. Small enough to avoid suspicion, large enough to matter. My stomach tightened. I scrolled back through the history, my fingers cold against the mouse. More transfers appeared. $500 here, $900 there. Always to the same account. Always labeled vaguely. The clock ticked louder. My breath caught in my chest. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple. Don't jump to conclusions, Bianca. Maybe it's business. Maybe it's taxes. Maybe it's something he forgot to tell you. But deep down, I knew. Numbers don't lie. And these numbers told a story. The next night, I opened the statements again. I told myself it was just to confirm, but really I was hoping to prove myself wrong. Instead, I found more. Jewelry purchases at high-end stores, dinners at restaurants I had never been invited to, hotel bookings in cities we hadn't visited together. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the screen. Then came the memory Gregory quitting his stable job years ago, standing in the kitchen with a wild grin. "Bianca, I can't keep working for someone else. I need to follow my passion." And me quietly pulling extra shifts, paying for Amelia's tuition, pretending his passion project wasn't draining us. I had been the safety net, the invisible scaffolding. Now he was cutting the net altogether. I knew I couldn't face this alone. Not anymore. One night, after Gregory left his phone on the counter and disappeared into the shower, I slipped into the study and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Philip Anderson, an old colleague turned attorney. It was past 9, but Philip picked up on the third ring. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that had soothed clients in crisis for decades. "Bianca, it's been a long time. What's going on?" My throat tightened, words tangled heavy with shame. But finally, I forced them out. "I think Gregory is hiding money. And I think he's having an affair." Silence, then a sigh. "Tell me everything." So I did. The transfers, the jewelry, the dinners. My voice shook as I laid out the evidence, each word slicing me open. Philip listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Bianca, you need to start documenting. Every statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence. Don't confront him yet. Just build your case." My hands trembled as I scribbled notes, his instructions clear. I felt like a soldier receiving battle orders, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of control. But control is not peace. Even as I gathered evidence, a part of me fought against it. I remembered the nights Gregory held me when I cried after miscarriages. The weekends we took Amelia to the beach building sandcastles until the tide swept them away. The anniversary trip to Charleston when he surprised me with roses and whispered, "Always you, Bianca." Were those moments lies, or had he truly loved me once before Cassandra? Before the deceit, the fragments of trust cut deeper than the evidence. Because evidence is clear. Trust is fog. I'd open a bank statement, see the transfer and think, maybe it's innocent. Then I'd see the jewelry receipt and think, no, it's real. My heart swung like a pendulum, disbelief crashing into resolve, crumbling into grief. One night, I sat at the dining table, the evidence spread before me. Statements, receipts, screenshots. My chest ached as if it might collapse inward. I whispered aloud to the empty room, "Why wasn't I enough?" The sound of my own voice startled me. I pressed a hand over my mouth, shaking. Tears blurred the papers until the numbers swam. But then I looked at Amelia's graduation photo pinned to the refrigerator. Her smile, her cap tilted, the pride in her eyes. And something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about me. This was about protecting her, protecting our future, protecting the years I had sacrificed. If Gregory wanted to play games with money, then he had chosen the wrong opponent. Because I was not just a wife. I was a financial professional. I knew how to follow the trail. I knew how to fight. The days blurred into nights and nights into quiet investigations. I built binders, 3 of them each labeled, each filled with neatly printed evidence. Transfers, emails, screenshots, notes from Philip. The binders became my companions, stacked neatly in the study. Whenever Gregory came home late, I'd slip into the room, open one, and trace the lines of evidence with my finger. Each page was a piece of betrayal. But together, they formed something stronger, a weapon. I started to feel less like a victim and more like an architect. Every document was a brick. Every screenshot a beam. I was constructing the fortress that would protect me when the storm came. And the storm was coming. I could feel it in the way Gregory avoided my eyes, in the way his phone never left his hand, in the way he smiled too broadly at nothing at all. One night as he slept, I whispered to the darkness, "You think you've outsmarted me. You think I'm blind. But I see you, Gregory, and when the time comes, you'll see me too." My voice was steady. My hands at last were still, because disbelief had turned into grief, and grief had turned into fire, and that fire would become my revenge. The colonial house loomed before me as I pulled into the driveway that evening, the headlights catching the familiar white shutters and ivy-draped porch. To the neighbors, it was still the picture of stability, a perfect family home in Augusta's historic district. But to me, it had become something else entirely, a silent battlefield waiting for its war. The brick steps, the polished brass doorknob, the flower pots by the entryway, all of it mocked me with memories. How many times had I walked up those steps with Gregory at my side? How many times had Amelia bounded through that door, her backpack bouncing her voice, calling Mom as though love itself lived in these walls? But love had fled. What remained was an empty echo of devotion, now replaced with suspicion and strategy. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the silence was deafening. The grandfather clock chimed softly in the hallway, indifferent to the chaos storming through my veins. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books the way it always had. But tonight, that comfort turned bitter. The living room, once our shared refuge, was now my command post. I spread my binders across the coffee table, each page of evidence like a blade waiting to strike transfers, receipts, screenshots, contracts. My laptop glowed, casting a blue halo across the leather couch. The battlefield was ready, and I, for once, was not the pawn. Headlights swept across the window. Tires crunched on the driveway. My pulse steadied, not quickened. The time had come. The front door slammed open, rattling the frame. His voice boomed through the house, raw and furious. "Bianca. Where the hell are you?" I didn't move. I didn't answer. Heavy footsteps stormed down the hallway, and then he burst into the living room. His face was flushed, his shirt wrinkled, his tie loosened. In his hand, crumpled, was the cream-colored envelope I had left him. He held it up like a weapon, his hand trembling. "You served me with divorce papers today of all days, on Amelia's graduation. How could you be so cruel?" I closed my laptop slowly, the click echoing like a gun cocked. I looked at him steadily, my voice calm, measured. "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans, Gregory. You wanted to start a new life. I'm simply helping you transition." His eyes widened. He wasn't expecting composure. He wanted tears, outrage, a scene he could dominate. "You had no right. I had every right." I interrupted, keeping my tone even. "Just as you had every right to choose Cassandra. We all make choices. You made yours. Now I've made mine." His mouth twisted. He tried to summon his old charm, the smirk that had convinced investors, the grin that had once melted me. "The prenup expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that." I leaned back, folding my hands neatly in my lap. "Actually, it didn't. Section 12 clearly states the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage. Your lawyer should have explained that." "Oh, wait." I tilted my head. "You didn't consult one, did you?" The smugness bled from his face. He faltered, his lips parting, but no words forming. His bravado cracked. "You can't do this to me," he said finally, his voice breaking. I stood, each movement deliberate, and paced slowly around the coffee table, circling him like a predator testing its prey. "We built this life together," I said, my tone like ice. "And you chose to end it. Not me, not Amelia. You." His phone buzzed. He ignored it, but his jaw twitched. "Cassandra." The name hung between us without being spoken. "You've always been calculating, Bianca," he said bitterly. "But this is cold. What about our history, 28 years? That means nothing to you." I stopped, facing him. For a moment, my chest tightened with the memory, anniversaries, vacations, laughter. But then I saw the evidence spread before us, the receipts for jewelry I never wore, the hotel bills for weekends I never shared. "Our history meant everything to me," I said quietly. "That's why your betrayal cut so deeply." His face softened, eyes glistening, a man rehearsing remorse. "Then maybe we can fix this. I made a mistake." People make mistakes. I let the silence stretch, then leaned closer, my voice sharp. "This wasn't a mistake, Gregory. This was a plan, a calculated betrayal spanning more than a year. You siphoned money. You promised her the house. You plotted to humiliate me in public." He flinched, as if struck. "You're exaggerating. Am I?" I reached for my phone, tapped the screen, and let his own voice fill the room. "After the graduation, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone." Then Cassandra's voice. "And she has no idea about the money, Gregory," again. "None. Bianca trusts me completely. That's her weakness." The silence afterward was louder than any scream. Gregory's skin drained of color. His knees seemed to buckle. He sank onto the couch, his body sagging under the weight of his own words. You recorded me." His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. "Not secretly," I replied evenly. "In Georgia, one-party consent is all that's required. And when you're in your own home plotting to defraud your wife, that's not private. That's evidence." He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook, not from sorrow, but from fear. I gathered my purse, slung the strap over my shoulder, and lifted the small overnight bag I had packed earlier. My voice, steady, carried finality. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your belongings. After that, the locks will be changed." "Bianca, please." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. I turned at the doorway, my gaze steady, my words sharp as glass. "Don't you dare use Amelia as your shield. You weren't thinking of her when you planned beachfront property with Cassandra." His lips trembled, but no rebuttal came. And with that, I stepped into the night, the heavy door closing behind me with the finality of a gavel. As I walked down the steps, the humid Georgia night wrapped around me. Cicadas sang in the trees, indifferent to the implosion inside the house. He thought he broke me tonight. He thought he staged the grand finale. But tonight wasn't his performance. It was mine. Every line, every move rehearsed and executed. He underestimated me again. That will be his downfall. The binders remained behind on the table waiting, but I didn't need them now. I had something greater. I had silence. I had evidence. I had truth. And I had myself. For the first time in 28 years, I felt untethered. Not weak, not erased, whole. Tomorrow the storm would come. But tonight, I walked away victorious. Diana's bungalow sat on a quiet street near the university, a small house that smelled of books and lavender. Unlike the colonial mansion Gregory and I had inhabited, Diana's home was cozy, humble, and alive with personality. Ivy crept up her porch rails, and through the window, I could see the glow of her sunroom, the space she loved most. When she opened the door, she didn't speak at first. She just pulled me into a hug so fierce I nearly dropped my overnight bag. Her arms smelled faintly of earth and chamomile, the scent of her garden. "I just heard from Amelia," she whispered. "Are you okay?" I managed a tired smile. "Better than I thought I'd be." She stepped aside, ushering me into her sanctuary. Her sunroom was alive with potted plants, their leaves stretching toward the lamplight. Books crowded the shelves, spines cracked from years of use. On the table sat an open bottle of wine and 2 waiting glasses. We sat across from each other, the night pressing against the windows, the hum of cicadas filtering in from outside. "I never thought Gregory would go that far," she said after a long silence. Her voice trembled with both disbelief and anger. "To announce it in public at Amelia's graduation? He's lost his mind." "It wasn't madness," I replied, swirling the wine in my glass. "It was theater. He wanted to humiliate me, to make me powerless in front of everyone. But he miscalculated." Diana's lips pressed into a thin line. "He always underestimated you. Always." Her words carried the sting of old wounds. Gregory had dismissed her too often, belittling her independence, mocking her choice to remain unmarried. Diana had borne it in silence, but I saw now how deeply his arrogance had scarred her. "He thought I'd break," I admitted softly. But instead, I felt strangely steady, like I'd been preparing for this without realizing. "That's because you have," she said firmly. "Every compromise, every sacrifice, you've been building armor all these years. Tonight, you finally used it." Her eyes glistened raw with hurt for me, but also with pride. We clinked glasses, the sound sharp, like a promise. The clock read nearly midnight when the knock came at the door. Diana and I exchanged a glance, and I rose, my heart already knowing. Amelia stood there still in her graduation dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks. The cap was gone, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen. She looked like both the child I once comforted after nightmares and the young woman she was becoming, fierce, fragile, breaking, rebuilding. She collapsed into my arms without a word. The sobs racked her body, violent and raw, and I held her the way I had when she was small, rocking her gently, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you." Her words broke through the sobs. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom? Why did you hide it?" I stroked her hair, my chest tightening. "Because I wanted you to have your day. I couldn't let him take that from you. This was your accomplishment, Amelia. You deserve to shine without shadows." She pulled back, tears glistening on her cheeks, her voice trembling with rage. "I thought Dad was just distracted. Always on his phone, always busy. But this stealing from us, lying to us while I worked 2 jobs to pay for textbooks, he was buying jewelry for her." Her words cut deeper than any evidence I had gathered. Hearing her frame his betrayal through her own struggles made the truth unbearable. I cupped her face in my hands. "That's why I fought back. That's why I couldn't ignore it. Because you deserve better. We both do." Her jaw tightened, anger blazing through the tears. "I'm with you, Mom. Whatever happens, I'm with you." Diana, standing quietly in the corner, placed a hand over her mouth, eyes shining. In Amelia's fierce declaration, I saw the future, messy, painful, but resilient. This wasn't just my battle anymore. It was ours. But beyond the warm cocoon of Diana's sunroom, the world churned with whispers. The calls began the next morning. Old friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives. Some offered sympathy. "We're so sorry, Bianca. We never expected Gregory to do something like this." Others fished for gossip. "What really happened? Did you know about Cassandra all along?" Gregory spun his own tale. Word spread that he was painting me as a cold, calculating wife who had plotted against him for years. He cast himself as the victim of a scheming woman who had turned Amelia against her father. But I refused to play his game. When people asked, I said simply, "Gregory and I are separating. These things happen. No details, no anger, just dignity." And slowly, people noticed. The restraint became its own form of power. Friends who had once looked at me with pity began to look with respect. They saw the calm in me, the steadiness. They contrasted it with Gregory's frantic denials, his over-explanations, his desperate need to control the story. Cassandra, meanwhile, began to falter. The glamorous new life she had envisioned with Gregory cracked quickly. The wealth he'd promised wasn't real. The accounts were frozen, the properties untouchable. Whispers floated back to me, Cassandra complaining to friends that she hadn't signed up for financial problems. Irony never tasted so sharp. Through it all, Amelia stood by me. She visited Diana's house often, sometimes crying, sometimes fuming, always resolute. "You're stronger than him, Mom," she told me one evening. "And people see it. I see it." And I realized she was right. Strength wasn't in the shouting, in the retaliation, in the gossip. Strength was in standing tall while the storm raged, letting the truth reveal itself in silence. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Not because I had won everything, but because I had nothing left to fear. That week, sitting in Diana's sunroom, surrounded by plants and light-sipping wine while Amelia leaned against my shoulder, I understood something profound. The tides of family had shifted. Gregory's betrayal was real, raw, and devastating, but it had also cleared the way for something new. I had my sister. I had my daughter. I had my dignity. And in a world obsessed with appearances, I had something Gregory could never reclaim: the moral high ground. For the first time in decades, I felt the quiet certainty of freedom. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to history. I had been there before years ago for small financial cases on behalf of clients, but walking through those heavy glass doors with my own name on the docket, that was different. I clutched my binder close, not because I needed the evidence again, but because it had become a kind of talisman. Each page represented a fragment of my pain transformed into proof. And proof, unlike promises, could not be erased. The courtroom was cold, the air conditioning blasting against the Georgia humidity outside. Rows of benches stood nearly empty save for a few curious onlookers and the whispering shuffle of attorneys waiting their turn. The walls loomed high-paneled in oak, casting everything in solemn authority. I took my place beside Philip, my attorney, who gave me a nod of reassurance. Gregory entered a few minutes later, his suit pressed, but his face, pale lips tight. Beside him sat a young associate, barely more than a boy, clearly unfit for family law. I almost pitied him. Almost. This is it, I told myself. Months of silence, of gathering, of holding my breath. It all comes to this room. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into a bun. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had seen every kind of lie, every variety of broken promise. When she sat, the room seemed to shrink into silence. All rise. We did. And then we sat. The clerk read the case, Caldwell v. Caldwell. The sound of my own name echoed strangely, like it belonged to someone else. Philip rose, his voice steady, as he presented the evidence: the prenup, the fidelity clause, the bank transfers, the recordings. Each document was passed up to the bench, each word hitting like a hammer. Gregory shifted in his seat, his hands clenched on the table. He whispered furiously to his young lawyer, who scribbled notes with a trembling hand. When it was Gregory's turn, his lawyer stammered, arguing the prenup had expired, that the evidence was taken out of context. His words wilted under the judge's stare. Finally, the judge lifted the prenup, flipping to Section 12. The hush of the room deepened. Her voice rang clear, cutting through the stale air. This document remains binding. The fidelity clause is enforceable for the duration of the marriage. Mr. Caldwell, you signed this agreement. Its terms are explicit. Gregory's face drained of color. His hand shook as he tugged at his collar. This is it, I thought. The very contract he demanded to protect himself has become the blade at his throat. The rulings came one by one, each like a gavel, striking not just the desk, but my heart. Joint accounts will remain frozen pending discovery. A freeze not just of funds, but of Gregory's freedom to maneuver, to manipulate. The man who once prided himself on risk and adventure, now trapped by the numbers he thought he controlled. Retirement accounts shall be divided per the terms of the agreement, with Mrs. Caldwell retaining 70% in the event of infidelity. 70%. The weight of those words was more than financial, it was symbolic. For years, I had been 70% of the marriage, 70% of the work, the sacrifice, the holding together. And now, finally, the scales matched reality. The family home shall remain in Mrs. Caldwell's possession during proceedings. The house, the battlefield, mine again. Not as a prison of broken promises, but as a sanctuary reclaimed. Each ruling carried its legal justification, but underneath, I heard something else: justice woven into poetry. The law was not just punishing him for dollars moved, but for trust, broken for years, stolen. As the judge spoke, my mind swirled. How many nights did I lie awake wondering if I was imagining things? How many mornings did I smile through clenched teeth, believing I had no choice but to endure? And now, here in this sterile room, my endurance bore fruit. My silence had become strength, my patience a weapon. I looked at Gregory. He was crumbling, though trying desperately to keep his posture. His lawyer fumbled papers, sweat beading at his temple. He thought he was untouchable. He thought charm and bravado could buy him freedom. But here, none of that matters. Not the smiles, not the lies. Only truth. Only proof. And the truth was on my side. When the judge paused, Gregory stood suddenly, his voice cracking. "Your Honor, please, this isn't fair. She's been planning this for months, manipulating everything. I made mistakes, but this is punishment, not justice." The judge's gaze froze him mid-sentence. "Mr. Caldwell," she said sternly, "you plotted financial deception. You violated the terms of your own agreement. This court will not reward betrayal." His shoulders slumped. For once, the drama that had carried him through so many situations fell flat. There was no audience here willing to applaud his act. Only silence. By the end of the session, the outcome was clear. The prenup held. The fidelity clause stood. The assets shifted firmly in my favor. As the gavel struck finalizing the interim rulings, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sorrow, vindication. This is what justice feels like, I told myself. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't undo the betrayal, but it restores balance. Gregory looked at me, then really looked. His eyes were bloodshot, his face lined with panic. And in that gaze, I saw recognition not of me as his wife, but of me as his reckoning. When I stepped out of the courthouse into the sunlight, the air felt different, lighter, brighter. The city hummed as though nothing had changed, but for me, everything had. The prenup he had insisted upon, his supposed shield, had become his undoing. The irony was almost too rich to bear. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. "You survived," I whispered to myself. "You endured, and now you are free." Behind me, the courthouse doors shut with a heavy thud. Ahead, the world opened wide and waiting. And I walked forward, not as Gregory's wife, not as a betrayed woman, but as Bianca Caldwell, whole, steady, and finally free. Rebirth is never quiet. It comes not as a gentle dawn, but as a shattering of old ceilings, a storm that clears the sky so new light can break through. For 28 years, my identity had been tied to Gregory's name, to his ventures, to his whims. I had been a wife, a mother, a supporter, a shadow. But when the court doors closed behind me and the sunlight hit my face, I knew I was no longer tethered. My name, Bianca Caldwell, was no longer a suffix to someone else's story. It was mine to claim, to define. The first weeks after the verdict, I moved like a woman learning to walk again. Simple things felt revolutionary: making coffee without wondering if Gregory wanted his first, walking through my home without tiptoeing around his moods, opening my bank app and seeing accounts that were wholly mine. Freedom, it turned out, tasted like quiet mornings and the absence of dread. But freedom alone wasn't enough. I wanted purpose, and I knew exactly where to begin. Home. For decades, I had managed money, our household's, Gregory's failed ventures, my company's corporate accounts. I had studied finance in school, dreamed of building a consultancy for women. But every time I reached for that dream, Gregory's voice would cut in, "Not now, Bianca. We can't afford distractions." Now the only voice in my ear was my own. I rented a modest office downtown, a 2-room suite above a bakery. The scent of bread and cinnamon rolls drifted through the floorboards each morning. I painted the walls a soft cream, lined the shelves with books on finance law and women's empowerment. I placed a single orchid on the desk, fragile yet resilient. My first clients trickled in through word of mouth. Women from my book club acquaintances from the PTA, even a neighbor who whispered over coffee, "I think my husband's hiding accounts from me." I listened. I guided. I taught them how to read bank statements, how to track expenses, how to set boundaries. I watched their eyes widen when they realized they could hold the pen to their own financial stories. One client still lingers in my memory. Her name was Rachel. She was in her early 30s with a toddler on her hip and shadows under her eyes. Her husband had cut off her access to their accounts, doling out allowances like crumbs. She came to me whispering, terrified even to be seen in my office. We sat for hours, combing through the documents she smuggled in a diaper bag. Piece by piece, I showed her what he had hidden. By the end of the month, we had opened an account in her name-filed paperwork and secured her legal representation. The day she left him, she walked into my office with no makeup, no jewelry, but her shoulders were straight, her voice clear. She hugged me and said, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No, Rachel, you saved yourself. I just handed you the map." Moments like that were the small victories that built my new life. Each woman who walked through my door was a reflection of myself at different stages, the doubt, the fear, the hesitation. And each time they left stronger, I felt a piece of my own broken self knit back together. It wasn't glamorous. My consultancy didn't rake in millions. Some days I worried about rent. Other days I wondered if I could carry the weight of other women's pain. But every breakthrough made it worthwhile. There was the woman in her 60s who confessed she had never written a check in her life. Her husband had handled everything. When he passed suddenly, she was paralyzed by bills and legal forms. Together we built her confidence until she could stand in line at the bank with her head high. There was the young professional earning 6 figures, but drowning in credit card debt, ashamed to admit she didn't understand budgeting. We worked through shame, through avoidance, until she laughed one day and said, "I finally feel like an adult." And there was the teenager, barely 18, who came in with her mother. The girl wanted to learn early to break the cycle. She reminded me of Amelia, bold and curious. Teaching her wasn't just education, it was prevention, a seed planted for a stronger future. Each story became a thread, weaving into a tapestry of resilience. My office was no longer just a workplace. It was a sanctuary where women discovered their voices, their worth, their power. As I built my consultancy, I also rebuilt myself. I learned that self-respect is not negotiable. For too long, I had bartered my worth for the illusion of stability. Now, I knew no relationship, no marriage, no family expectation was worth losing myself. I learned that financial literacy is freedom. Numbers had once been my prison, the evidence of Gregory's betrayal. But they also became my weapon, my shield, my liberation. Teaching women to master them was like handing out keys to invisible chains. And most of all, I learned that silence can be powerful, but voice is transformative. For years, I swallowed truths to keep peace. Now I spoke. I taught others to speak. And in those voices, I heard echoes of my own. My guiding philosophy crystallized into 3 simple tenets. 1. Respect yourself first. 2. Understand your money. 3. Never let anyone else write your story. Amelia visited often, her laughter filling my office. She had graduated with honors, started her own career, and yet she always circled back to me. "Mom," she said one evening, perched on the edge of my desk, "do you realize what you're doing? You're helping women rewrite their lives. You're giving them what you wish someone had given you. Her words pierced me not as pain, but as validation. You're right, I said softly. I'm building what I once needed. She smiled, eyes bright. I'm so proud of you. Those words meant more than any ruling, any paycheck, because they came from the person for whom I had once sacrificed everything. Now she saw me not as a shadow, but as a light. Rebirth didn't mean forgetting. Gregory's betrayal was still etched in me, a scar that throbbed sometimes in the quiet hours. But scars are proof of survival, not weakness. Standing in my office, the scent of bread drifting up from the bakery, the hum of women's voices rising in conversation, I realized something. My life was no longer defined by what had been taken from me. It was defined by what I was building. I was no longer just a caregiver, a wife, a supporter. I was a consultant, a teacher, a guide. Most importantly, I was Bianca Caldwell reborn, and this time the story was mine to tell.